whole goal of the co-op is to harness the spirit and the benefits of a district, but yet still remaining, independent departments.
Welcome to the Triple P Podcast, Premier, Professional, and Proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. I'm your host, Clayton O'Brien, and I'm the fire chief in the city of Napoleon, and I'm an active member of the association. I currently sit on the executive board for the Ohio Fire Chiefs Foundation, and I became an association fellow in 2021 as part of class number 10. The Ohio Fire Chiefs Association exists to improve the safety of Ohio by leading, representing, educating, and supporting Ohio emergency services. This podcast is not only for the members of the association, but also for any other fire and emergency service leaders. It is the purpose of the association to promote education, best practices, and study ways and means to cope with the ever-increasing need for a better understanding of the complex problems which are being presented to the fire protection and emergency services of our nation today. I'm joined by my co-host and my assistant chief, Joel Fry.
Thanks, Clayton. Hello, I am Joel Fry, Assistant Fire Chief for Napoleon Fire and Rescue. I am a current member of the OFCA, and I currently sit on the Education Committee. I am happy to be here, striving to advance the fire service as a whole.
Welcome to episode number 7. We have Chief Josh Hartbarger with us today and also Chief Doug Meyer. We get to talk all about the co-op that they created up in the White House and Waterville area. So super excited because one thing that's really, really special about these two is that I had the opportunity of nominating them for the Innovation Award for the through the foundation for the conference this year. And both of these gentlemen were the recipients of that, which got them to the conference for all week. Part of that was they had to deliver the, a presentation there at the conference. And so what we're going to do here today with the podcast is just really kind of talk about all those things that you talked about at the conference. But we want to be able to share it with all of our listeners about all the advantages, all the disadvantages, all the challenges that you guys went through, all those different things that you guys experienced along the way, because I know that it was not an easy road, and I know it wasn't, and it's still just very in its infant stages. So let's just start off doing some introductions. So we'll start off with Josh, if you want to just kind of give us a little bit of introduction, maybe what got you into wanting to do this co-op and how it kind of was dreamt up, and then we'll move over to you. Okay, Doug?
Well, thank you. And again, thanks for having us here. This is exciting and very humbled for receiving that award and the nomination. Obviously, you and I have been close friends for a very long time, so I've known Clayton for a very long time. And again, I can't tell you enough how appreciative we are, and it's an experience. It's an experience. That's how I can sum it up. But so the co-op was really born. It started more with a conversation about staffing struggles. So I think that's kind of a buzzword everybody is used to and hears nowadays, because I don't know if there's a single department that isn't experiencing some level of staffing issues. So it kind of began with a brainstorm session, and it was more involved with the idea of a creation of a district in the beginning. Well, as we get into this, and the listeners will hear, that didn't pan out, so we knew we had to come back to the table because the challenges and the struggles were still there. So that's how it began.
Well, I remember, Josh, way back, as you said, we've known each other for a long time. So there's been a lot of times we have conversations on the telephone, bouncing things off each other. When you first mentioned co-op, I had never heard about it before, ever. Never even heard about the idea. Always heard about fire districts, but never heard about a co-op. So, and I think that might be the same across the state, which is why I think it's the next best, greatest thing, You did describe the difference between a co-op and a district one time to me. And what was that terminology that you used? How did you describe what the difference is?
So autonomy, with the co-op, our departments are still autonomous, and obviously we have chiefs for each department. But the whole goal of the co-op is to harness the spirit and the benefits of a district, but yet still remaining, independent departments, but obviously working to build the bridge if anything would ever need to go a different way. We've at least started to work together in that capacity.
Yeah, and I really liked that, you had said a perfect example of this is a co-op is like dating, and a district is like being married. So I'm like, wow, that is like a perfect analogy of what that really means. Like, maybe eventually it's sometimes every co-op does turn into a district, but it's essentially you're just dating in the beginning before you're actually marrying. So I mean, I think that's a perfect example.
Correct. And that was an interesting conversation early on. Well, it was actually after we kind of knew the district wasn't going to be a reality. There was a meeting with some elected officials and then obviously the chiefs, and that was kind of popped into the head, and we said that's a perfect example of what this is, because you know what? It may not work out. We think it's going to work out. We know we're committed to one another, but just like in a marriage, you have challenges, you have struggles that you have to get through, and your commitment has to be to one another. And it is a perfect sum up of exactly what this is. We're in the dating phase now.
You are in the dating phase. And so what's super important about that, I think, to really highlight here is that it takes two strong-willed individuals willing to work together, open themselves up, be vulnerable, and be trusting of each other, because this doesn't work without both of you. So, I've known you, Josh, for a long time. I've gotten to know Doug over the years a lot, and learned a lot about you. And I think we first met in an instructor class, the Live 1403 class, and you were the deputy chief in Waterville before becoming chief. And so why don't you just give us a little introduction, but then I want to just kind of touch base on how you and Josh really grew together before this was even dreamt up, because I feel like we just got to talk about all these things of a relationship that has to be built first before you guys get to open session meetings and before you guys really talk about dating, because that stage right there, I say, is what my son says is the talking stage. So you guys were just talking and then built up to where now you guys are actually dating. And then if it ever does, come to light that you guys actually get married, then that's one thing. But I'm saying in the talking stage, I know it takes two individuals very much to trust each other, to believe in one each other, and to be always open, because you just never know, as we all know in the world of fire chiefs, and even in the fire service as a whole, type A personalities, politics, everything else. And if that bond between you two kind of isn't really, really strong, could have really challenged a lot of this thing, and could have maybe changed it. So why don't you give us a little introduction, Doug, and we'll get into it too.
Sure. I'm Doug Meyer, Chief of Waterville. And yes, Clayton, I first met you in a 1403 class when the state came out with that requirement. I think we were one of the first in Lucas County to put a class on, and we're in it together. Kind of grown to get to know you through that, and through knowing Chief Hartbarger, we have that mutual connection. But part of the co-op, when I worked with Chief Hartbarger and understanding our relationship there, obviously we went to high school together, so we knew each other through school. We kind of always had that little, we know each other. But then in the professional side of things, even when I was deputy chief, getting to use him as a mentor and a leader, and then eventually getting to work with them as counterparts was a huge piece. We really got to know each other, had a lot of sit-down conversations, as you said, that talking phase, getting the idea of trusting each other and knowing that we're out there to build a better community, not to necessarily harm each other, but take and make the community better. Once we got that settled, the rest went real smooth. But yeah, we had a lot of conversations, and I will say there were a lot of phone conversations. There were some late nights.
I bet.
There was even, and again, to stress that everything isn't sunshine and roses. I mean, conversations weren't always peachy. Conversations sometimes were hard. But I think part of what made us a unique situation was that when we took a hard conversation, we were able to talk all the way through the end of it. And even if we had to take a break, because of, hours or whatever, evening, we would start up in the next day and continue on that conversation to work till we got it resolved, instead of just giving up on it. So that was a huge thing.
But maybe taking a break or whatever and coming back to it, because I feel like naturally we would get upset at times and be like, really you question the trust at sometimes, and you question like how true is everybody to it, because like I said, you're challenged with the politics out there, and then some people are going to be very for it, some people are not. But we're not talking about just two individuals, and we're not talking about just politicians out in your communities. We're talking about how many people do you have on your staff, Josh?
We were just shy of 60 now.
Just shy of 60, and you, Doug?
We were at about 35.
Yeah, and so you're talking just shy of 100 people that this involves, or that it affects, I should say. And if that affects more than just about 100 people, there's obviously 100 different types of opinions, and then communication from you two back to your staff has to be the exact same, because otherwise that's where it gets a little hairy. And then also the communication has to be strong up top. So I can say that because I've known you guys now since, and mostly Josh all the way through this process, that was something that I thought you guys did very, very well at. You guys really, really trusted each other through the process, and then leaned on one another because your relationship wasn't built on what I call like a glass house. Like, you guys weren't yes man to each other. You guys could have candid conversations that were, back and forth. And if you didn't like what the other person said, that's okay. But we respected each other, and your relationships didn't break down to it. Because I really feel like that was would have been a hard challenge for anybody. And what really the audience needs to understand, if they ever decided or wanted to do a co-op, the talking phase has to be built on really solid trust and working relationships before you can ever start dating.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fear is a big aspect, and when we get into this, one of the slides we talk about, that's the first hurdle to get over is fear, and part of that talking phase is just understanding that there's nothing to fear from each other. The fear is just the growth of the future is, I guess, more so where people should focus.
Yeah.
And I think that was, again, kind of back to why it was dating is, we had those hard discussions. And I mean, sometimes they were, we be honest, we're human. They were arguments. And what I love about Doug and a lot of credit that I'm going to give to him is, he reflects. So, a lot of, I think it's extremely important when you're in big situations like this, if you have a perception of, the situation, being able to go home and reflect and take in what the other person said, and just be open and objective and say, do I need to change my mind? Do I need to change my point? And, he actually, through this process, was able to change, my point on quite a few situations within it, and open my eyes to something that I was a little blind to see, and vice versa. And I think that is, again, why it does seem like dating, because that's exactly what it is. When you're getting to know the person, understand, what their beliefs are, what their character is, it's extremely important. And that I give them credit, because character is the number one thing, and that was the commitment to one another, is that we're not gonna walk away and go to bed angry. We're gonna talk about it before we go home,
which is really good. Now, when the co-op was first dreamt about or thought about, did it only include Waterville and White House, or Waterville, because it's Waterville Township, White House? Like, did it only include those individuals or that sector initially?
Yeah, at that stage, it was to the point of where we were the three remaining entities that were interested in collaborating together. Because, in the very beginning district study, we actually had the Ohio Fire Chiefs come out, and Stan Crosley, brilliant man, came and did a feasibility study for us with his team. And in the beginning, it was actually there was discussions with the other entities that were around us, which would have been Monclova and Providence Fire.
Yep.
But obviously, as time went on, when we kind of started to really hone down through the feasibility study, those two entities decided that wasn't an option for them at that time. That, they weren't interested in moving forward with that, which was okay. So that's why we proceeded forward with the feasibility study with Waterville Township, and White House.
And don't forget, sometimes situations are different across the board. So just because those other two entities at that time weren't interested, there were things that helped drive that, right? So, Monclova wasn't experiencing a true staff shortage yet. Providence didn't have the drive from the citizens to want to raise a levy, and weren't necessarily totally hurting all the way yet either. So, they didn't look at it as that was the right time for them. So everybody kind of has a different approach to things, but this was something that we thought would work for our three communities, and really believed in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it hit off pretty well with both your village administrators and city administrators right away, and mayors and things of that. Or
so this is where I'm going to give my administration. Jordan Doherty, my village administrator, was instrumental in just a phenomenal influence into saying, think outside the box. because sometimes as firefighters we get comfortable in our area that we are because of how different the day can be for us. So it is a little challenging to say, all right, time out. If I could rebuild this from ground zero, what would I do? So he was instrumental in allowing that creative freedom to really to harness, and that even came with some interesting arguments with my my village administrator. Our mayor at the time also extremely supportive, and our council as well. They understood. It took about 2 years. I took over from Chief McNutt in 2016, and it was that July. Myself and Deputy Chief Francis. We were on for 31 days because we just had a shortage of people. Now, we weren't hurting like some of the other communities around, but that was kind of that eye-opening experience to say, yeah, what we're doing isn't working right now, so we need to really look at this, tear it apart, and say, what direction do we need to go? And that was kind of the beginning for me when I knew that, yeah, we got a problem. And that was all the way back in 2016. So it took 2 years to communicate that to council, to mayor, and then also you have to communicate it in a way that doesn't present, Chicken Little, the sky is falling, because at that time it wasn't. It was a bad July when that happened, but it picked back up, and it was, I would say, balance out towards the end of that summer. So again, we didn't want to scare anybody. We didn't want to use fear tactics. We just wanted to educate. It was all about educating our elected officials, and very grateful to have the people we had in place at that time, because they were so supportive of understanding and not going to maybe like step C when we were really at step A or step 1, so.
And Waterville was the same way. So our administration looked at the ramifications of every piece of the pie. So they said, well, if we're not doing a district, why not? So they were trying to diagnose that as well, kind of challenging us to show them that this was the right avenue to go. But once we explained it in terms that they could understand, not so much fire lingo, it made things smoother. We have a public safety committee that bought into it, which really helped with our administrator, who then supported all of it all the way through, very supportive, made sure we've gotten through every hurdle. Waterville's gotten through every hurdle pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
And the co-op, was very well supported by the citizens as well.
Josh Hartbarger is the fire chief of the White House Fire Department. He was promoted in 2016 after having been with the White House Fire Department for 15 years. He is a nationally registered paramedic, firefighter level 2, instructor, and inspector. In 2005, Josh graduated from Owens Community College with an associate's degree in liberal arts, with a concentration on government. Upon graduation, Josh served the National Science Foundation as a fire lieutenant at a station in Antarctica. While there, he oversaw a base fire inspections, including the Scott South Pole Station. In 2015, Josh graduated from Bowling Green State University with a bachelor's degree in fire administration. He is currently pursuing his Master's of Public Health at The Ohio University. Josh lives in White House, Ohio, with his lovely wife, Nicole, and his daughters, Josie and Valerie. His passion is leadership through creative change and innovation.
So with that being said, you said that there were some organizations that didn't want to join on. Is that something that they could potentially join in at a later date?
Yeah, so once we get into the discussion of how the co-op is formed, it is open-ended. So other entities can choose to join, or again, should we decide at the end of 10 years that this is not a benefit, we do have a conclusion to it. But again, I don't think we're going to see that. I think the collaboration is going to prove itself, regardless of what that means for the future.
Well, then let's get into it. So you
one point, if I can.
Yeah.
He said something that was perfect and spot on, and I think it's important to note that there is a language barrier and a disconnect with individuals that understand the fire service and individuals that are not in the fire service. So an example, my administrator, it took about 2 years to get him to where he was comfortable understanding what shift rotation is, what state requirements are, what ORC, OAC that we have to follow. So I think it is important for anybody that is looking at any type of this change. I can't say it enough, and I've heard it before. education for your elected officials and for your administration is key.
Okay, so let's get into it. Starting with that first slide that I see here is the one with the pledge, and it's just got two containers on the slide. Just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I put this in there initially as a way to try to jokingly frustrate Chief Hartbarger.
Describe what it is.
But one bottle is a bottle of lemon pledge, so it smells lemony fresh. The other is a bottle of orange pledge, which gives you the orange scent. So there was a long standing joke that I was through this co-op and district that I would end up being his janitorial service person, and I wanted to know, would he rather have lemon or pledge? Or orange pledge for his office when I dusted it. So,
and I think we can emphasize that was your.
So that would have been a little bit of that fear.
No, that was
fear. You know, like that's what I'm talking about. Like, you know, the little bit of fear that had to have the trust and saying that Doug is now feeling like he's going to be dusting Josh's office.
Yeah.
And so, how did you get through it?
So the way we got through that, I initially was joking with him, and he and again, remember how we talked about that conversation, right? He looked at me one day, and he had said, he's like, all right, listen, for this to work, we have to stop. He's like, I get that it's a joke and everything, but you're building something that isn't true. He's like, we got to quit. He's like, what's your fear? You know, and I explained to him, well, the fear was that they would be headquarters and that there wouldn't be a mutual thing, that it would be more of a takeover is what that fear was. Once him and I had that conversation and I stopped the joking and we got through the fear of, okay, he's not taking us over, we're mutually coming to solve a problem. I only put this in there, and the people can't see it, but I wrote in the middle of it because I want you to lose it today. Because every time after we had that conversation, I'd bring it up. It would. I think it was a way to get his goat.
That was probably one of our tougher spots in our relationship, but it ended, and I think this is where it's important. Again, just like dating, you got to fight.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be respectful of one another. You have to push through it, and you have to get those fears out. And once I heard that, of course, I don't feel great about that because I'm like, man, you know, I look at him as an equal, you know, and never would I want him to feel as if, you know, he would be below or someone is superior than the other, because that's not collaboration. That's not a partnership.
So what did you tell him? Did you tell him orange or lemon?
So I wouldn't answer. So that's the joke, is I wouldn't answer him. I wouldn't. And
no, he never did. He never did answer it, ever.
And it wasn't until the very end when the documents were signed and I looked at him and I think I said orange.
Yeah,
it was the very final time. But that was, that was a fear.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to combat that was, even back when we first start with the district, that is a fear of a lot of people, is who's in charge.
Yep.
And it's like, well, wait a second, before we can even get there. And again, that's where I love this guy, because he's willing to take stuff and reflect and not let that inner stuff just build up and then manifest later. You know, we were able to pound through that to say, look, I was willing at that point in my career to say, if the right decision for the Village of White House is to go into a district and it doesn't include me, I'm willing to support that, because ultimately we know that our fire departments have to provide the service for our citizens, regardless of what happens anywhere else. We have a service that we have to provide. And if our current level isn't meeting that expectation of what the citizens deserve, and we have to move to another direction, and that means it doesn't include me, I'm okay with that, as long as the Village of White House was taken care of in the manner that they need to be taken care of. And that was a good discussion that we had.
And yeah, the end of that, I reflected as well and thought, okay, it's spot on. I have to do what's right for the citizens of Waterville. And I can tell you, and I'll say this candidly, Waterville, when I was interim chief, dropped 5 calls to you, I think, 65 unanswered calls where no Waterville unit responded. That's unacceptable, and it was something that I knew I needed to fix. And obviously this was our way of getting past that. But I also said, you know what, if you look at the citizens as a whole, there may not be, if the end solution is that there may not be an administrative chief for Waterville, but Waterville's fire department grows, gets stronger, the citizens get those answered calls, people get the help that they need, then what am I worried about at that point? In my opinion, I've done my job. They always say leave the service better than you started. So if you're moving out but things are better, didn't you really do your job
Absolutely.
at that point?
And I really think
Amen.
that that's what's huge too. I mean, to be able to actually open both of you to open up that way and saying, hey, the mission or what we're doing it for, we're not doing it for personal gain. You're not doing it for, financial or personal gain of any sort. It's doing it for the betterment of what we all signed up for in the first place. And that was for the citizens of both of your communities at the time. And so by both of your communities at the time, though, also requires so much of the services and requires so much money, and in order for the more people in the pot, the cheaper it is for everybody and the better service that's provided. So I see exactly why and how that co-op was created and why I think it's the coolest thing ever, that you guys were able to get through it.
So who really brought up the original idea?
So
Bob Evans.
Yeah. So it was after the feasibility study. They did a community-wide presentation at the high school. And again, Stan's team did a phenomenal job. So no way, shape, or form on them on why this wasn't successful, because I mean the product that they did for us was instrumental in actually kind of how this came to fruition. But after that meeting, we could tell, I look at this, I'm no expert, but I look at this in three categories. You have, in order for a district to be feasible, you have to have the political support, you have to have the citizen support, and then you have to have the department culture ready to accept it. And at that time, we had the political support, I think, to do it, possibly.
I think
Not
that was
100%.
close, but yeah.
We had the political support to do it, but we lacked a lot of the community support, as well as there was a lot of questions within the department. So ultimately, we knew at the end of that meeting, you and I were out in the parking lot, and we were having a discussion of, we kind of knew that idea was done at that point. Put a fork in it, it's done. So, we knew that we still had to push forward because the challenges still existed. Even without this, it was kind of like, it was almost not saying that I wanted to go in that direction, but it was disappointing because we had a potential solution that may have worked. And now we were starting back at ground zero. So I think that was kind of that disappointment or failure of that end. And again, for good reason, because obviously if it's not supported, it's not going to work anyways. So that's when we said, well, looks like we're going to breakfast. And so we went to breakfast,
We did.
met up at Bob Evans the next day, literally pulled out a napkin and said, what do we like about the district? Let's you and I talk pros and cons now. And that's what we did for about an hour and 45 minutes of building a pros and cons list, and then actually saying, well, how can we make this work without even forming a district? And thus the co-op, was born. And I look at it, we called it co-op because they're like, what the heck are we going to call this thing?
Yeah.
I think that was the discussion. I'm like, you know what? It's a cooperative. We're working together. It's a cooperative. We're going to call it the co-op. That's how we coined it. And it was like,
I was going to say coining it was crucial. You always talk about selling things and making people understand. Remember how I talked earlier about the fire lingo, making people understand how it's going to work, right? So, district, they understand a district. School districts, they understand those things, right? But we're going to create something that wasn't a district, but we're also not going to remain 100% on our own. We're going to work together, right? Well, you don't want to go out there and say, oh, well, we're working together. So we had to coin a good phrase, and that was where Chief Hartbarger came up with the cooperative agreement, and I was like, yeah, we got something going. And then naming it the W3, obviously, Waterville Township, and White House, you got the 3 W's, and, BW3's already, going wild wigs, so we had to come up with something different, But that's where it came from, was literally that morning that we said we are going to fix the problem. We both agreed that there's no way around it. We are fixing the problem. What that 100% looked like, we weren't sure, but we were going to try something and give it everything that we had. So, and then we just kind of worked together and smoothed over some details.
yep. Brought the deputy chiefs in, Jason Francis and Zach Bainham, and I think that's important when we're laying out a vision. Again, that buy-in. We have to look at that 5-year, 10-year mark and what's sustainable. And sometimes, I remember being in the line position, even as a lieutenant, it's difficult to look outside of the 1-year mark. So it was important we had collaboration with them as well, because we needed it. We needed to make sure that this new vision that literally was thought of in less than 24 hours is going to be sustainable and work. And that actually, I think, got the momentum going when we all kind of sat down again as a group and said, okay, what can work, what can't? There was a lot of ideas in there we knew were like, ooh, we're going to have some trouble here, and we're going to have to sort through these. But it was cool because, we had already been through so many of those hurdles. It just kind of felt natural to say, okay, how can we get beyond it?
And that's where that talking phase that you spoke of, really came key, because we did look at the hurdles and went, oh my gosh, how? But then when you sit down to the table, we look at each other and we're like, well, this ain't as bad as it was when we were arguing about lemon and orange pledge. So I mean, once we started weighing that thing out, we're like, all right, this isn't as bad. I mean, yeah, it's a big hurdle, but we can get through it. We got through it. There was a few nights we ordered some pizza and had a training room with whiteboards all around there, and it would have looked like we were a kindergarten class with scribbles all over the board. But it worked. We were like, all right, well, let's just continue to keep putting different ideas up here and link them. Okay, this was, erase it. It's gone. So it worked out real nice. And I think another thing that was huge was keeping the communication even. So at the time, I didn't have a way to do mass communication at Waterville. Everything was done through memos. We'd put it in mailboxes. We had to wait to get things out on training nights. We have a way now, but at that time we didn't. He had Chief Hartbarger had a way to do mass communication. So he could get things out way quicker. But what we noticed was when his communication would go out, it's accurate for sure, 100%. It was what we want to communicate. But his people were getting it 2 and 3 days before mine. Mine were then accusing us of hiding things. So what we did was Chief Hartbarger and I started literally waiting and saying, okay, what day, what time are we putting this out? And he would hold something, so I would hold. Our firefighters started getting it at the same time, same information, same time. And it started to bring the two groups of line firefighters started to come together, because then when they had questions, they'd bounce them off each other.
Yep. And I think that's huge to point, is the staff that are at each department. It's phenomenal. I mean, I can't. I'm blessed as a chief to have the people that I do, because we don't. It's just it's an awesome environment to be able to have people want to proactively come up and say, Chief, I got a question about this because I don't know what this means, and that fear comes up. And being able to have that conversation and get reality and get factual information to them before the telephone kind of thing starts is huge. And that was, you're absolutely right. I mean, identifying that we got to get them, it's only fair that they have the information at the same time. You have to do that.
Doug Meyer is the fire chief for the City of Waterville Fire Department. He was promoted to chief in 2020 after having served on the fire department for 20 years. Chief Meyer holds EMT Basic, Fire 2, Fire Inspector, Fire Instructor, and Live Fire Instructor. Currently serving as the Lucas County Fire Chiefs President and attending Bowling Green State University for his bachelor's in fire administration. Prior to the fire service, he served in the military as the 180th Fighter Wing and the 178th Fighter Wing as an F-16 mechanic. Served 3 tours in the Middle East and is now a veteran. Doug lives in Waterville with his amazing wife Amber, 5 children, Isaac, Alexis, Natalie, Xavier, and Dominic. Current passion is leadership and working to better the culture in the fire service.
Well, I think the communication would have probably been one of the challenges throughout the entire process, just because of exactly what you talked about. As a challenge, you guys addressed it very quickly. You were able to then turn on it and make sure that your people got it and brought them together. Because, if we don't communicate, I always like to say, just being transparent all the time. Because if you're not communicating, we all know, we were all there at one point being the firefighters on the line. When we sat around the kitchen table, we solved all the world's problems. And most of the time, it wasn't exactly the way that it was supposed to be. So that's why I'm kind of like that same way. Like, let's get the information out there. Let's put it to them, and let's talk to them on the bay floor. Let's talk to them wherever we need to do, because they need to be empowered. They need to be bought into this for this all to work. So that was one of the challenges. Let's get into the list of your other challenges that you have there, and just kind of like talk about some of those other things that that you had throughout the process.
Yeah, when we were starting to talk about the co-op, we said, let's pair up and see what are our current challenges that we have. And of course, for White House, we are blessed to still have a awesome, dedicated volunteer group. However, I think just as anyone will notice, as the state fire marshal is even, and the governor have put together this task force, everyone gets it that the numbers are declining. And why that is, we don't know exactly, but we just know that they're declining. So we know that we have to stabilize and supplement in that way. So another thing that White House was experiencing at that time, we had a smaller part-time workforce, and we knew that if our numbers of volunteers are declining, then inevitably our deployment model, which at that time when I took over in 2016 was a complete volunteer deployment model. So we knew that we had to change and kind of, move a little bit more into that staff situation, but then also letting the volunteers know, hey, this is not pushing you out. We actually need you now more than ever, but we have to, get that initial deployment out with people sitting in the station. And then at that time, we had and still do have a contract with Lucas County. The county has a ALS system that is comprised of 11 life squads that are dispatched to primarily ALS incidents throughout the county that will assist with the first responders. So that was where a lot of my full-time staffing came from. I have, I at that time had 9 paramedics that were rotation on the life squad, so I could utilize one of those paramedics if they were not off or, sick time off or vacation time off. That was what I really had with one other part-time person in place for a EMS deployment at that time.
Yeah, so Waterville kind of experienced some of the same things. We were a little, I guess if you would say, ahead of White House. Our declining volunteers hit a lot harder, a lot quicker. Our run volume was really increasing in the area with growth, and so that was shrinking very quickly, very rapidly. In fact, I'm down to, I believe, I have 5 volunteers, and of those 5, 3 are active. Our part-time list was shrinking due to, at that time, open positions on major metropolitan departments, and we didn't have full-time at the time, so there was no promotion.
Again, as we're going through this slide, this was kind of that point again where the district idea we know was done. We now have this new vision of a co-op that we think can work, and it's getting our elected officials on board now. Because remember, they were on board with, or most of them, I should say, not all of them, but most of them were on board with the feasibility of a district. Well, we're not doing that, so now how do we re-energize? So we had to put a lot of time and effort into re-educating our elected officials into why we still want to have some type of partnership together. And that actually is where the dating phase kind of came out, because we had a group meeting, and there were a few that were very still interested in going with the district, and that was kind of where that came out. And I said, well, doesn't it make sense to date before we get married? And there was a lot of chuckles in that room when that happened, and even my mayor kind of looks over at me. He's kind of like, this is the tie event, when you're sitting down. But at that point, we knew I got to risk it all, and I'm going to break the ice. We got to risk it all. So we said that, and I think that was kind of the turning point with the elected officials, where we knew we had the buy-in with them to still want to proceed forward in collaboration. So the W3 committee was created. At that time, it was just still the individuals that were working with the feasibility study at first, but now we kind of got put into another project. All right, let's move forward with this.
Now, when you talked about that, and you talked about, hey, would it be better to date before we got married in that meeting? So who was all in that meeting, and how did you guys form that meeting, or what? Walk us through that.
So that was a regroup meeting from, again, right after we knew that the district idea was kind of done. That was, hey, let's sit down and let's get back into this. So we had some elected officials in there, the administrators, and then the chiefs as well.
Okay. And then that way is just kind of break. Now you say, hey, now we're done talking. Now we're going to start dating, and this will be where we're going to be moving, because now the district is done. Get it in your mind of the co-op, and then kind of see how they buy it, and then to kind of move on from there.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had passed out the information to them prior to that, so they kind of knew what we were thinking co-op. And again, I think that was another realization in that meeting, that it's like, even as much as we've been talking about this now for a year, there's still some that barrier exists of being able to, really digest what does it mean for staffing in the fire service.
So what's next steps then? After you have that meeting, you talk to them, what's the next steps?
So after that, we sat down, started running numbers, got with the auditor to find out what it would cost. We decided what we needed to do was strengthen mutual aid. We needed to figure out how to help each other with funding, and then we had to figure out how we were going to run each department, again, with communications and different things going through. So we kind of made that combination. That was the co-op, and Hartbarger and I sat down and said, okay, how do we present this in non-fire lingo terms? We've come up with a couple of charts to help put things in perspective. We came up with a funding model, which was a levy that each community could put on, and knowing that the funding stays with that community, but it was an equal levy across all three communities that would still work. So each community was still getting taxed the same way. They get control of their money, but yet it was a way to strengthen the fire department's funding.
Which I think is one of the biggest questions and probably what a lot of the other chiefs have, right? Because that's what our mind goes to right away. Like co-op, we want to do all these big, great things, but we know somebody's got to pay for it. How do we pay for it? You talked about funding. You talked about a levy at 3 different ones. So you got a levy in Waterville, a levy in Waterville Township, and a levy in White House. And all 3 of those were separate levies, but the exact same amounts, right?
Correct. Yeah. So in the beginning, White House did not have. We were actually just general fund appropriated. Same thing with Waterville. So Waterville Township was the only entity that was in this that had existing fire levies, and they did it via contractual obligation to both Village of White House and City of Waterville. So we had to come up with that idea. It's like, well, in the feasibility study, they said. We have, I believe that number was, it was upper 6s or 7 mils.
6.7 something, I think.
Yeah. And that was where we lost some of the community support. So we
Sure.
said, no, that's huge because, we have a phenomenal school system in our communities. And, obviously there's a lot that is committed to fund that right now. So we knew that we had to come up with an idea that was bare bones, but not lean. So that was where we thought, okay, if 3.25 is achievable, and at that time when we were going through stuff, that was even on the higher end of achievable for us. We said, well, with that and still the contribution from the general fund, we're at about that 6 to 7 mils kind of area that makes it feasible to put staffing on to where we need it to be.
So the idea was then, so each place is going to run a levy, but the general funds from Waterville and White House are still going to remain the same.
Correct.
So if you're whatever that number is, they're still going to be giving to the fire department, and then this would be all additional money.
A supplement, yes. And
Okay.
the same with Waterville Township. So the 2 existing levies that they had were older, and they were supplemented, some by the state. Those were also remained.
Okay.
So this was the 3.25 wasn't to start over. So, with the district, when they came up with that 6.7, that was as if you had no funding. The district, that was the district funding. So the idea was
that was no supplement from the city general
Correct.
funds type
Correct.
of thing.
correct.
Okay, gotcha.
That would have been just funded on its own.
Yep.
But the citizens obviously would be paying that higher amount. So we were able to bring the amount down using some of the existing funding and keeping it unified across the board.
So 3 different levies, all the same amount. What happens when one doesn't pass? Let's say one of your entities didn't pass that levy at the 3.25. Are they just out of the co-op, or how does that all work?
So that was the big question, and it came up actually initially once we understood exactly what we were doing with the co-op. Once we had political support, of course, what do you think our next step is? We got to take this to the legal team and say, well, how can we place this together, to make this make sense? And I remember that first meeting. I'm going to give Gary Summers a plug from Heben's. Even Summers and Lewandowski. I'm sorry, even Murphy and Lewandowski. Kent Murphy's going to be mad at me for that one. But anyways, Gary, known as Handsome Gary. So if anyone wants his contact information, he's known as Handsome Gary. I remember that first meeting. We sat down and I did the pitch to him. It was a soft pitch, and he laughed at me. And Gary he's a brilliant man, and he's very respectable. So, and we have a great relationship. So prior to this, but when he laughed, I looked at him. I said, What don't you understand about this? He's like, this is ridiculous. He's like, why wouldn't you just do a district? And he starts pulling up ORC and code and everything and starts laying it out. And Jordan Doherty, my administrator, was with me when he does that. And I'm like, Gary, stop. And he kind of stops and he looks at me. I said, don't you remember the first part of my pitch where I said our communities aren't ready for that? And he's like, yeah, I do, but this makes sense legally. And I said, that was like, well, okay, it makes sense legally, but it ain't going to happen. So how about we actually focus on now what Chief Meyer and I have put together? And what I love about Gary is Gary reflects too. He's like, all right, I'm going to spend some time on this, but I'm going to come back to you with, I don't know how we're going to do this other than the other. And it was awesome that it was like 24 hours later. Again, it's like these 24-hour marks keep coming up. I get this call from Gary Summers, and he's like, I get it. He's like, I understand now why. And like, he has been, ever since that turning point, he's actually been one of our strongest cheerleaders in this, because he was able to take this idea and put it now in a contractual means that makes sense for everybody. And again, the guy is just awesome. He's committed. He's actually used our template to tie to other areas within safety services, but to other communities to try to help, pair things together that just don't make sense to form full-on mergers.
Thank you for listening to the Triple P Podcast. This is part 1 of a 2-part series with Chief Doug Myers and Chief Josh Hartbarger. Tune in next month for part 2.
Thank you for tuning in to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. If you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you feel so inclined, please help us spread the word by telling your fire and EMS friends about this channel. Chief O'Brien has been serving the fire and EMS community since 2005 with the support from his wife, Bobby, son, Ashton, and daughter, Aislinn. Chief O'Brien began as a volunteer and worked his way up to the rank of fire chief in 2015. He began his full-time career with the city of Fostoria in 2008 and moved to the city of Napoleon in 2009, where he has been a fire chief since 2015. Chief O'Brien is a progressive servant leader. He is committed to improving the fire service through developing young men and women into becoming leaders in the fire service. You will often hear Chief O'Brien ask his staff and others he encounters in the profession, "What are you doing today to make the fire service better than it was yesterday?" He is extremely passionate about training in all disciplines and is enormously proud of bringing a state-of-the-art training facility to the city of Napoleon. Chief O'Brien holds an associate's degree in fire science and a bachelor's degree in business administration. He is a nationally registered paramedic, firefighter 2, fire inspector, hazmat technician, and fire EMS, ACLS, and PALS, as well as a CPR instructor. Chief O'Brien is an active member with the Henry County Fire Chiefs, Northwest Ohio Chiefs, the Ohio Fire Chiefs, and the International Association of Fire Chiefs. He participates weekly with the Napoleon Rotary Club, sits on the Substance Misuse and Community Partnerships Committees, and is on the executive board for the LEPC. Joel Fry is the Assistant Fire Chief for Napoleon Fire and Rescue in the city of Napoleon, Ohio. He has been in the fire service for 13 years. Joel has obtained an associate's degree in fire science and a bachelor's degree in fire administration. Joel is a nationally certified paramedic, firefighter 2, fire instructor, EMS CE instructor, CPR instructor, hazmat technician, and fire safety inspector. Joel heads up the Prevention Public Education Division and works to create strong relationships throughout the community in which he serves. Joel has a wonderful wife, Katie, and 4 young boys at home. He is a member of the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association, the OFCA Education Committee, Northwest Ohio Fire Chiefs Association, the Northwest Ohio Fire Prevention Association, the Henry County Fire Chiefs Association, and the treasurer of the Henry County Firemen's Association Training Commission.